This story is about the power of human connection. I'm a fourth-generation Coloradan, and I'm also a Colorado State University alum. Exactly. My career has been centered around communications and community outreach, and over the past couple of years, I've been volunteering here at CSU in the College of Liberal Arts. In 2016, Dr. Eric Ishiwata, an ethnic studies professor here at CSU, invited me out to Fort Morgan, a small town on the northeastern plains of Colorado, to join a group of his first-generation college students, work with a group of immigrant and refugee high school students during their first day of a new program called the First Generation Near Peer Mentoring Program. The idea behind this peer mentoring program is to bridge education gaps. So, CSU students who are the first in their families to go to school are partnered with high school students who are underserved. And in the case of Fort Morgan, students who are from Mexico, Central America, and Africa. I made the 85-mile drive out to this tiny little town, and I spent the day observing these students interact with each other. They demonstrated cultural and language acceptance, and they were all committed to achieving the same goal, learning about and accepting each other. After just spending that one day in Fort Morgan, I felt the power of human connection. And once I experienced it, I needed to tell the whole world about it. At about the same time, I had the opportunity to hear human rights attorney Brian Stevenson speak in person about the role proximity plays in what he calls the justice quotient. Mr. Stevenson could choose to work in any environment, but he spends much of his time in jail cells with inmates on death row. That's proximity. His message to me was, proximity to human rights issues is necessary in order to better understand them and affect change. Once I heard him speak, I was more convinced than ever that the world needed to get close to what was taking place in Fort Morgan. But clearly not everybody could travel there. I needed help putting people in proximity to my experiences. That's when something happened to me that made me feel like I was in a scene from Back to the Future, except I wasn't quite sure if I was Marty or Doc Brown. I reconnected with some friends who own a video production company, and they introduced me to virtual reality. When they showed me that VR could put me anywhere in the world at any time, that's when it hit me, like a bolt of lightning. They were Doc Brown, and I was Marty. But instead of harnessing this bolt of lightning to get me home, like Marty, my friends were going to help power my story. So, we placed their virtual reality camera in the classroom, and we documented these students. By producing this virtual reality film, we could create the sense of proximity for viewers so they could see what I was seeing, and they too could experience the power of human connection. Why Fort Morgan? Why first-generation students? And why virtual reality? Well, first, I'm from Sterling, and Sterling is very close to Fort Morgan. Second, both sides of my family are German-Russian immigrants. They were a part of the mass migration from Russia to northeastern Colorado in the mid to late 1800s. They fled to the US in search of jobs. And coincidentally, in Colorado, the sugar industry was booming at the time, so many of these immigrants, my family included, found jobs working long, hard hours in the sugar beet fields. Their hard work provided wonderful new opportunities for their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, and me. And hearing stories about my ancestors has helped me better understand who I am. I am the proud product of immigrants, and I am grateful for their bravery, their ingenuity, their hard work, and their perseverance. But most of all, I'm grateful for their stories, because their stories connect me to them, the people in my past who made my future possible. But another reason why this story is so important to me is because my mom was a first-generation college student. And hearing how difficult it was for her to get there and stay there really resonated with me when I met some of the CSU first-gen students. So, why Fort Morgan? Why first-generation students? And why virtual reality? Let's start with Fort Morgan. A lack of resources in rural communities is very common, and this gap between urban and rural living continues to grow. The jobs in a small town can also affect its demographics, and that's exactly what happened in Fort Morgan. In the early 1970s, the sugar beet industry was rapidly fading. The population in Fort Morgan was 7,600 people, and of that, only 99% of the population was white, with only 78 people identifying as, in 1970s terms, other races. But in 2015, the census data had shown that the population grew to 11,000 people, and of that, 48% of the population was white, 43% was Hispanic or Latinx, and 6% was Black or African, with 27 different languages being spoken in this tiny little town. So what happened to this town to change its demographics so much? According to Dr. Ishiwata's research, a prominent meatpacking plant had moved into the area. The sugar beet industry was rapidly fading, and the meatpacking plant kind of saved the area's economy. But when the locals better understood the type of repetitive and dangerous work required at the plant, they were either unwilling or unable to do that work. So, people from other communities, people from other countries moved to Fort Morgan to fill those positions, just like many of the German-Russian immigrants did back in the 1800s. And for a while, the labor needs were being met until 2006, when immigration enforcement raided meatpacking plants nationwide and not only arrested many employees who were undocumented, but also sanctioned the employers for hiring workers who were undocumented, leaving thousands of positions vacant that could only be filled by people who were documented. So, many African refugees who had fled their home because of violence and famine and war moved to Fort Morgan to fill those positions. They settled in the US through the State Department's Refugee Resettlement Program, and they moved to Fort Morgan to work. Now, this resettlement process is not unique to Fort Morgan. This is happening in many other communities nationwide. Getting proximate to this situation helps us better understand what's happening in our own communities. So let's talk about the first-generation college students. First-generation college students are at a high risk of not completing college. In fact, IRPE research at CSU shows that if first-generation college students don't declare a major within their first year of school, it's unlikely they'll return for their second year. Information about the college experience isn't always available, and the needs for some first-generation college students can't always be met in a new college environment. Research at CSU also shows that overall retention and graduation rates are 36% lower and 30% lower than non-first-generation students. But when you flip that coin, when first-generation students are connected to a program during their first year of college, they actually outperform other students. They succeed more. Out of the 2,200 first-generation award recipients at CSU, 1,800 of them have graduated, resulting in an 82% graduation rate that far exceeds that of the regular student body. And I got to see the start of that success with the CSU students connected to the Near Peer Mentoring Program. As their work progressed, their confidence grew, and a deeper sense of purpose began to emerge. The CSU students wanted to share their college experience with the Fort Morgan students, so they invited them to spend the day with them on campus. They attended classes together, they toured the dorms, and the Fort Morgan students got a better understanding of what college looks like.
For the high school students, they've all heard the word college. They might have a soft image of what college is, but they will be the first ones in their families, maybe the first ones in their neighborhoods to ever attend college. And by hosting them at Colorado State, it was the first time that they have set foot on a college campus.
And for the students who weren't able to attend that day, virtual reality now provides a way for them to get to CSU. I want to introduce you to Miguel. Miguel is a first-generation student who was connected to the Near Peer program his first semester in college. By getting close to the situation in Fort Morgan and connecting with these Fort Morgan students, Miguel developed a sense of empathy for what many of these Fort Morgan students are going through. And he's improving the likelihood that they will continue their education.
Basically, what teachers and other people must just see are the surface of them being students, and what we see when we interacted with them was that they had other things going on with their life besides school. It was them working, it was them having to support their families, them having to take care of their siblings, and on top of all that, having to take care of school.
By connecting to this program, Miguel is also improving his chances for college success. After spending his first semester in college mentoring these high school students, Miguel chose a major in communications. No matter what words I use to tell this story, they don't fully describe the depth of the connection between these students. And that's why virtual reality is so important. With VR, when you put those goggles on, you can see and feel for yourselves this powerful human connection that allowed these students to accept their differences and build trusting relationships. It's a positive change in the type of unity our world needs today. Here's the most compelling aspect of their work that our VR cameras captured. The CSU students added a storytelling component to their mentoring. They broke out into small groups and they began to ask the Fort Morgan students stories about their past. The storytelling piece was so important because for many of these Fort Morgan students, it was the first time they'd ever been asked anything about their past, where they come from, who they are, and their hope for the future.
I thank God for my family because they are all still alive even now. Guatemala is very dangerous country. I never imagined that I would have learned English.
When I finish college, I will go back Africa. When I will go back Africa, I will help the poor people. That's my dream. I love my country. My country looks like heaven.
It's powerful. And if I didn't have the technology to virtually get you to Fort Morgan, to put you in proximity of this situation, how would you know who these students are and how they're working to improve the world? History is repeating itself in northeastern Colorado and all around the world. And this time, we're alive to witness it. And if we choose to get close to it, to get proximate to it, either physically or through virtual reality, it may change our world for the better. Thank you.